Being late to the president's funeral is inexcusable.
You clearly didn't care much about the president. You really let your true colors show at the very end.
My boss seized the chance to insult me for being late, even though I was delayed because I helped someone in need.
I'm going to be the next president. When that happens, you're fired.
Humiliated in front of all the mourners, I couldn't deny that I was late, and I had no words to defend myself. I was ready to give up and leave, thinking nothing I said would matter anyway. When?
If someone like you takes over, I'll ruin your company.
With the appearance of a certain person, the power dynamic between my boss and me flipped entirely. From that moment, my life began to change drastically. My name is Jason. Mom, Dad, the orchids you both took such good care of bloomed this morning. I spoke to my parents, who were sleeping peacefully. We were in the hospital. 3 months ago, they were in an accident while taking a walk. According to witnesses, a child walking ahead of them had dropped a ball and ran into the street. My parents tried to help and ended up in the accident. Fortunately, the child only had minor scrapes, but my parents were left in a coma. The child's father said, "I'm truly sorry," bowing deeply when I rushed to the hospital after hearing the news. Please, stop. My parents have always been like heroes of justice. It's okay. They'll wake up soon. I told him, as much to reassure myself. 3 months have passed, but my parents are still in a deep sleep today. Looking toward the window, I noticed the flowers in the vase had changed to cherry blossoms. It looks like someone else came to visit. That's nice, isn't it, Mom, Dad? I visit the hospital on Wednesdays and Sundays when I have the day off from work, but apparently, someone else has been visiting regularly on the other days. For these past 3 months, flowers have never been missing from the room. Mom and Dad, you weren't just my heroes. You were everyone's. Every time I saw the flowers, I realized how much people loved them. I'll become someone who can help others, just like you too. Looking at their peaceful faces, I made a vow. Good morning.
Good morning, Jason. Sorry to hit you with this right away, but...
When I arrived at the office, the boss had already been there earlier than anyone else, as usual. The company I work for is known for having a small but elite team. The boss works in the same office as the employees, always keeping an eye on our performance. He often gives us advice directly, and thanks to that, I've grown a lot. Fortunately, he recognizes my efforts, and my co-workers have started gossiping that I might be the next president. To be honest, I don't care about the title or position. I just want to be a hero of justice like my parents. But one person doesn't like those rumors. My supervisor, Harrison. If age alone were the deciding factor, Harrison should be next in line for the presidency. However, because the boss favors me, Harrison often finds reasons to harass me.
Jason! This report is wrong. Fix it immediately.
Sorry. I have a meeting and then a client dinner today, so I'll do it tomorrow.
Don't be lazy. I want it done today.
Am I supposed to come back to the office after the client dinner? It's not like we need the report until next month. Unable to stand up to him, I sighed deeply. Wait, he hasn't come in yet? One day, I arrived at the usual time, but the boss wasn't there, as he normally would be. Take it easy for a change, I thought as I watered the plants by the window, something he usually did. But even after work hours began, the boss still hadn't shown up. Where is the boss? As everyone in the office started getting worried, the phone rang.
Good morning. This is Harris Enterprises.
The co-worker's voice suddenly dropped. After hanging up, she looked down and said,
It was the boss's wife. He passed away last night.
What? The office fell silent. Apparently, the boss collapsed suddenly at home last night. He was rushed to the hospital, but he passed away shortly after. No way. He was so full of energy yesterday. I looked at his desk. Piles of work he'd planned to tackle today were still sitting there. Don't leave so suddenly. I could do my best because you were here. Overwhelmed with mixed emotions, I couldn't focus on work for the rest of the day. 2 days later, the day of the president's funeral arrived, though I still hadn't come to terms with everything. I put on the unfamiliar formal suit and left the house, but everything outside looked just as usual. The cicadas continued their chorus, undeterred by the heat, and the sky was just as blue as it had been a few days ago when the president was still alive. I passed by the pizza place where we had once eaten together. I was so engrossed in conversation with the president that I honestly couldn't remember how the pizza tasted, but I could clearly recall the way he always ate salami pizza. I looked around, half expecting the president to suddenly appear out of nowhere, but of course, that wasn't going to happen. Sigh. With a heavy sigh, I kept walking and noticed about 10 meters ahead, an elderly woman who appeared to be blind was walking along the tactile paving, using a white cane. Just then, a bicycle approached from the front. The cyclist wasn't paying attention, focused on their phone instead.
Watch out!
I yelled and sprinted toward them as fast as I could. The cyclist noticed just in time and swerved to avoid the old woman. Are you okay, ma'am? I rushed over to her, and she turned her face toward me.
Oh. Thank you so much.
With that, she turned back and resumed walking. She must be used to walking alone. Her cane tapped along steadily in rhythm. I thought it might be rude to offer too much help, but the road here was narrow, and bicycles frequently rode on the sidewalk. Wait, ma'am. Where are you heading? I couldn't just leave her alone, so I called out to her again.
I've arranged for someone to pick me up at the station ahead.
I walked beside her as she continued, keeping pace. Don't you get scared walking alone?
Of course I do. I'm always terrified that someone else might get hurt because of me.
Her voice was much quieter than before. I was surprised by her unexpected answer. She wasn't worried about her own safety but about those around her. Suddenly, I thought of my parents. It's okay, ma'am. No one's going to get hurt. We're all here to help each other, so don't think it's your fault. That's right. My parents didn't sacrifice themselves. They just helped the person in front of them. Perhaps sensing my sudden silence, the old woman began asking me questions about my job and other things.
You're a dependable young man. What's your name?
My name is Jason.
Jason. I'm Nancy. I hope we meet again someday.
When we arrived at the station, a man standing next to a black car approached us.
Madam, this way, please.
Sorry to keep you waiting. Jason here helped me along the way.
Oh, I see. Thank you very much for your help.
Both the man and Nancy bowed deeply to show their gratitude. No need to thank me. I just walked with her. Well, I'll be off now. With that, I turned around and dashed back the way I had come. When I arrived at the funeral hall, the ceremony had already started. Sitting in the back row, I gazed at the portrait of my president, recalling all the days we worked together. His face in the photo looked as gentle as always. When my parents had their accident, he had quietly stayed by my side, supporting me. Thanks to you, I've been able to move forward in life. I wanted to express my gratitude even more. I wanted to work with him so much longer. Tears kept flowing uncontrollably. After the service ended, Harrison came over to me.
Late to the boss's funeral? Unbelievable! You really didn't care about him, did you? You finally slipped up in the end.
He seized the opportunity to belittle me.
I'm the next boss, and when that happens, you're fired.
In front of all the attendees, Harrison humiliated me. I felt bitter, but being late to the funeral was my fault. I couldn't say anything in return. He continued to mock me without mercy as I remained silent. People around us frowned and started whispering to each other. I didn't want to make things worse and disrespect the boss, so I decided to leave before the casket was carried out. Just then, a black luxury car pulled up in front of the hall. This car, it looks familiar. The driver stepped out and opened the back door. To my surprise, Nancy was inside.
We've been expecting you, madam.
One of the attendees hurried toward the car. Wait, Nancy's a company president? I couldn't help but shout in surprise. Nancy turned her head toward me, hearing my voice.
Oh, it's that young man.
The woman next to her whispered something into her ear. Nancy frowned and spoke.
If someone like you is going to take over, that company will go under.
She was directing those words at Harrison, who had insulted me. It seemed the woman had told her what had just happened. Stunned by the sudden turn of events, I struggled to find words. Sensing my confusion, Nancy smiled and explained.
Actually, your boss and I were classmates in college. We've been pushing each other to do better ever since we both became CEOs. When you mentioned attending a funeral, I thought it might be him, and it turns out I was right.
She continued.
Your boss was lucky to have such a kind and hard-working employee like you. I'd love to work with you as well. Would you be willing to handle a large contract with my company?
Yes. Of course. Thank you so much. I could hardly believe what was happening and felt overwhelmed with gratitude.
There's one more thing I need to tell you.
Her gentle expression suddenly turned more serious.
My grandson was saved by your parents, Jason.
What? I couldn't believe Nancy was bringing up my parents. Noticing my shock, Nancy paused for a moment, then slowly began to speak. She explained that the accident that left my parents in their current condition happened because they saved her grandson when he ran out into the street. Nancy had been walking with him but couldn't help because of her blindness. My parents had stepped in, risking their own lives. Nancy expressed her deep regret and bowed her head to me. "Please, Nancy, lift your head. My parents are still alive, and your grandson is, too. Don't think of it as a sacrifice." I spoke from my heart, trying to reassure her. As Nancy lifted her head, tears streamed down her face.
Thank you for helping me earlier, even though you were late to such an important funeral. It's rare to find someone who can naturally extend a hand to those in need. Jason, you're just like your parents.
Her words moved me deeply. I might not be able to do much, but maybe I was becoming a little more like my parents. The thought brought tears to my eyes. Suddenly, something crossed my mind. Wait, could it be, have you been the one visiting my parents and leaving flowers? Nancy nodded quietly.
It's the least I can do. I always pray for them to wake up soon.
My parents love flowers. I'm sure they're happy, surrounded by their fragrance. Hearing that, Nancy finally gave a small, gentle smile. After the boss passed away, it felt like there was a hole in my heart, but I couldn't stay sad forever. We had to protect the company he left behind. With that thought in mind, we worked as hard as we could.
Please reconsider. I'm begging you.
Lately, Harrison had been constantly bowing his head over the phone. The truth was, several clients and business associates had witnessed the entire scene at the boss's funeral. As a result, many of them refused to do business with Harrison anymore. His performance declined rapidly, and he was eventually transferred to another department, essentially a demotion. Meanwhile, I secured a major contract with Nancy's company, and with Harrison out of the picture, my performance soared. 9 months later, to the surprise of many, I was chosen to become the new president. Mom, Dad, I have some news for you. I spoke to my parents as usual. I've become the president. I'm going to protect the company that helped me grow into who I am today. They still had the same peaceful expressions as always. So, could you wake up soon? I'd always put on a brave face in front of them, but for some reason, today, my true feelings slipped out. I gripped my father's hand tightly. Dad, you know I'm not cut out to be president, right? I'm so full of doubts. Please, just laugh it off for me. I looked at him. Huh? Did he hear me? His eyelid twitched slightly. Dad! Dad! The grip on my hand tightened, and slowly, he opened his eyes. Do you recognize me? It's Jason. My father looked at me, smiled a little, and nodded.
Where's your mom?
She's still sleeping since the accident. I hurried over to my mom's side and took her hand. Mom! Dad's awake. You should wake up too. I want to drink your soup again. My father called out her name as well. Then, I felt her fingers move slightly. Mom! Mom! Incredibly, my mom opened her eyes just a little.
I had such a pleasant dream, surrounded by the scent of so many flowers.
She smiled. I couldn't believe it. I was actually talking to both of them. My vision blurred with tears as I tried to get a better look at their faces. With my face soaked in tears, I pointed toward the window. The child you saved is doing well. Their family always brings these flowers for you.
Sweet peas, aren't they? How lovely.
In the direction they were looking, colorful sweet peas bloomed. Coincidentally, sweet peas were my mother's favorite flower. Thank you, Nancy, I whispered in my heart. The sight of my beloved parents smiling at each other was blindingly beautiful. It struck me how truly happy it is to have the people you care about smiling right in front of you.
So, is it true? You've become the president?
Really? We should celebrate.
I'm not a kid anymore, no need to celebrate. I felt embarrassed and declined without thinking.
No matter how old you get, you'll always be our precious child. Everyone is special to someone, so life must be cherished. Sorry for making you worry, Jason.
My father bowed his head, and my mother followed suit. I'm proud of you, Dad and Mom. I want to become more like both of you. I looked into their eyes and expressed my feelings. They exchanged glances, their eyes filling with tears. Ah, I'm so happy. Savoring this happiness, I vowed to keep living with my parents as my inspiration. How did you enjoy today's story? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.